This guy went from being broke, addicted and completely lost to flying private jets, running billion-dollar real estate deals and building one of the loudest personal brands in business. Grant Cardone is everywhere. He's got the books, the flashy 10x conferences and the real estate empire that he claims manages billions. But here's the question. Did he really build his fortune from smart investing and hard work? Or is it the results of selling his image, a dream and a lifestyle? Today, we're breaking down exactly how Grant Cardone really made over $1 billion. Grant grew up in Lake Charles, Louisiana. He was one of 5 kids and his dad passed away when he was just 10 years old. He talked about how losing his dad and later his older brother hit him hard. He describes his younger self as angry, lost and without direction. By his early 20s, things weren't looking good. He was drinking heavily, using drugs, and says he overdosed multiple times. At 25, he finally went to rehab. That's the moment he himself points to as his turning point. In his own words, that's when he decided he couldn't keep wasting time. He needed to find a skill, get disciplined, and start building a life. Grant needed a fresh start. He didn't have money, he didn't have connections, and honestly, he didn't have many options. That's when he landed in car sales, a job he admitted he hated at first. He said in interviews that he thought selling cars was embarrassing, even beneath him, but it was the only shot he had. Instead of treating it like a dead-end job, he treated it like practice. He started studying sales, the way some people study medicine. Every rejection became a data point. Every no was a lesson to how to get a yes. And him studying worked. Pretty quickly, he became one of the top guys on the lot. He wasn't just selling cars, he was outselling entire teams. At one point, he said he was moving 30 cars in 2 weeks, which is insane. For context, most salespeople would be happy with a handful in the same time frame. That success did 2 things for him. First, it gave him the money, 6 figures a year. But more importantly, it gave him a system. He started writing down what worked, building scripts and testing ways to duplicate the process. And that's when it clicked for him. The real opportunity wasn't just in selling cars, it was perfecting sales as a process. And that realization set up his first real breakthrough, going from the guy on the showroom floor to being the guy training the entire industry. Once Grant figured out that his sales methods could be packaged and sold, he made the jump into training. He started consulting with car dealerships, first locally and then across the US. According to Data to Leads, he was getting paid thousands of dollars to fly in, run workshops and boost dealership numbers in just a few days. It wasn't glamorous. He was logging around tapes, manuals and binders, but it was scalable. A dealership that might pay one salesperson 50 grand a year could instead pay Grant a fraction of that for training that lifted the whole team's output. As demand grew, he built out full programs, recorded seminars, scripts, role-play exercises, and eventually full-on sales boot camps. By the mid-2000s, he wasn't just helping car dealerships anymore. He was working with Fortune 500 companies. And this is where the brand Grant Cardone really started taking shape. He wasn't just a guy who beat addiction and crushed it in car sales. He was positioning himself as the authority on sales in general. The move from salesman to a trainer also gave him something else: freedom. Instead of relying on commissions from a single dealership, he could make money from dozens, even hundreds of businesses at once. And because the material could be reused, like recorded seminars, it meant that he could keep selling without being physically present. By the time he published books like If You're Not First, You're Last, and later The 10x Rule, he already had a growing audience of people who trusted his approach. The books weren't just books, they were lead magnets for his training programs, conferences, and eventually his real estate business. But Grant's rise isn't really about the books, the events, or the flashy image. It all comes back to real estate. That's the empire he's built, the centerpiece of his story, and the evidence he points to whenever he needs to prove that his methods actually work. It's the foundation of his brand and the part of his journey he highlights more than anything else. Grant says his very first property investment was a single family house in Houston. He thought it would be easy, buy it, rent it, collect passive income. But he's admitted that the tenant ended up being more hassle than profit, and that the experience pushed him to pivot. He realized single family rentals just didn't scale. So he went bigger. His first real taste of success came when he bought a 38-unit apartment complex in San Diego in the mid-1990s. He said he scraped together every dollar he could, even borrowing against himself to make it happen. That deal gave him consistent cash flow and, more importantly, confidence. From then on, his focus was clear: multifamily properties only. Over the years, he kept stacking deals. By the early 2000s, he was quietly building a portfolio of apartment complexes in Houston, San Diego, and Florida. And then in 2016, he officially launched Cardone Capital. The idea behind Cardone Capital is simple, but powerful. Instead of just using his own money, he opened the door to regular investors. Basically dozens or even hundreds of people put in smaller amounts, and Grant uses that pool to buy big apartment buildings that most individuals could never afford on their own. The pitch is that the investors get steady cash flow and long-term equity, while Grant and his team handle the work. Today, Cardone Capital claims to manage more than $4 billion in assets across nearly 12,000 units. For example, he bought a $100 million complex in South Florida called the 10X Living at Fort Lauderdale. He's also picked up luxury apartments in Austin and Nashville with prices ranging from $50 million to over $150 million per property. But here's where the story gets interesting. Critics argue that while the properties are very real, the way he raises money and markets the deals can be a little aggressive. A Palm Beach Post investigation in 2022 found that one of his first complexes was overcharging tenants who were supposed to be working in the workforce housing program. That raised questions about whether the mission of helping people invest was being undercut by squeezing renters. There is also the issue of returns. On Instagram and YouTube, Grant has sometimes promised annual returns of 50% or more. The SEC told him in 2020 to tone down those claims because they sounded too much like guarantees, which isn't allowed in security law. And in 2021, a California investor even sued him, claiming he'd been misled by those kinds of statements. To his credit though, Grant didn't back down. He argued that Cardone Capital is legit, that he's transparent about risks, and that he's putting his own money into every deal too. And at the same time, online you find plenty of investors who seem to be happy. You can find testimonials online from people who say they're getting steady checks every quarter. But it's also clear that the real estate business isn't just about the buildings. It's also about the brand. Think about it. If you see Grant flying private and preaching 10x, you're more likely to trust him with your money. The jets, the watches, the big conferences, they're not just lifestyle perks. They're marketing tools that make his real estate pitch even stronger. So yeah, the properties are real, the cash flow is real, but a huge part of how the empire got this big comes down to his ability to sell the idea of investing with Grant Cardone. And that ability ties right back to the skills he first picked up selling cars. When it comes to his net worth, estimates are all over the place. A Go Banking Rates article claims that his current net worth is around $1.6 billion and suggests that his real estate firm Cardone Capital is valued at over $5 billion. However, these higher numbers lack verification from reputable financial or industry reporting. Instead, they appear to be more promotional rather than grounded in independently vetted financial data. Finance Yahoo, for example, says it's closer to $400 million US. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. He for sure owns hundreds of millions in real estate plus income from his books, conferences, and social media. The public opinion on Grant Cardone is completely split. His fans see him as proof that discipline, hustle, and refusing to quit can change your life. They look at his private jets, real estate empire, and massive following as the result of hard work and smart risk taking. But critics see him as a hype machine. On Reddit, one user wrote, "He makes a lot of money selling dreams and sales courses. I doubt he really got rich off real estate." Another put it even simpler. Grant Cardone is great at selling Grant Cardone. That split between inspiration and skepticism is what makes him so polarizing. So how did Grant really make his money? Real estate is a huge part of it. Cardone Capital manages billions, and the properties are real. But it's also clear that his brand, the books, the courses, the conferences, the social media hype has just been as important. He didn't just build businesses, he built a persona, a character that represents success and confidence. His lifestyle isn't just for him, it's marketing, it's a proof of concept. And whether you think his strategy is genius or manipulative depends on how you feel about the guy. So what do you think? Business genius or master marketer? What's undeniable is that he turned his lowest point into fuel. He went from rehab and rock bottom to building a net worth in the hundreds of millions. So maybe the bigger lesson isn't whether every claim Grant makes is accurate. It's that in today's world, the outside image can be just as powerful as the substance. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to subscribe. I'll keep digging into real stories behind business empires.